All right, for today's video review, we're going to be taking a look at Transformers Revenge of the Fallen Bludgeon. A very cool figure here. Now, of course, there were two Bludgeons in the Revenge of the Fallen toy line. There was one that was the deluxe version that was a repaint of the figure Wreckage, which was part of like I don't remember what it was exclusive to, but it was like a two-pack. And then, of course, they did the Voyager Bludgeon, which is much more directly based on his like actual G1 design rather than just being, you know, a repaint of a previous figure. But yeah, no, he turns into a pretty cool tank mode here. He's got a nice ratcheting, rotating turret here, which is cool. He does notionally have little wheels on the underside here, though these are like super tight, so they kind of just sit there. He doesn't actually like really roll. And you can also take this little turret on top and rotate that as well. He does come with a couple accessories. He comes with his main turret here, which actually is his sword in robot mode, which both of these are like kind of a softer, more pliable plastic, but this one really has a tendency to warp over time, especially like if you have him posed in robot mode, just like the creep of the blade will just eventually kind of fold down like that. It's also snapped on mine like 3 or 4 times. I've glued it on there and it seems stable right now, but you know, I try not to mess with it too much and try to like unwarp it or anything, which is kind of a shame, but you know, it's not too bad in tank mode. It like maybe bends down a little bit, but you know, these also are that plastic and they also are a little bit warped. These can't pose or anything. They're just kind of sticking out there, but you can see they're not even like really symmetrical with each other just because of the warping. Like this one should be up more like that, but it's like yeah, I don't know. It's just a slightly pliable plastic, so it just has a tendency to warp over time, but it's a little bit harder to like fix. And then he also comes with this smaller knife, which in terms of storage has this really neat feature where you can unclick this section of the turret and open it up, and then it will like do this like mecha live thing where you can see the sheath right there, which will actually like pop out like that just due to the geometry of the hinges here, and you can just slide this in there like that and then close it back up and it will actually like suck into the turret, which is super cool. I always really liked that feature on this toy. But yeah, no, pretty cool looking tank mode. He's got the weird sort of like tread and wheel fake thing going on in the front here for how it ends up in like on his shoulders in robot mode. I sort of wish this was just some more generic techie detail because I think it looks super weird like on the front of the tank like this, but you know, whatever. In terms of comparisons in this mode, here he is with Kingdom Sideswipe, so you can see, I mean, you know, tank formers should usually be bigger, and I don't really have a great concept of how well this scales. I presume he's still quite a bit too small, but you know, that's what they look like together. And then here he is with our more recent Bludgeon from Legacy Evolution, who's definitely more of like a Cybertronian design being based on the Tarn figure, but that's what they look like together. And then yeah, another thing worth mentioning is he's got these like rubber tread bits which like tab into these sections here, and they're on like kind of a hinge here, and because they're like this, you know, kind of less pliable rubber, they do tend to like, I don't know, like unlock from this section and then not totally like sit right. So like the tank mode is sitting up a little bit, and it's like it's supposed to sit down like this, but just because of those treads, like it's a bit weird, and it's definitely one part of the figure that hasn't aged super well, but it's not too terrible. But yeah, to get onto transformation, first thing you want to do is to take those treads and just kind of untab them, and you kind of rotate them up like this. They'll end up just sort of hanging off of his arms in robot mode. Then you want to take these sections back here and they will untab. You can kind of untab this whole section here, but for now you just want to take this bit, kind of get it around the turret and just fold it down like this and do that on both sides. And that gives you the clearance to untab these whole things, the whole legs here. You can rotate them around like this on this armature section, and then also rotate them in, which you kind of have to do simultaneously, otherwise these bits will bump into this back panel. And then also, you know, notionally, I think this was supposed to tab into here in alt mode, but it really doesn't. It just, the geometry doesn't really like line up, but it kind of doesn't really cause any problems, so it's not really that big of an issue, but I guess worth mentioning. But we'll just kind of leave that floating there for now so that we can take this whole section And we want to compress it up like this, which will also reveal his head, which comes into this little gap right here, which is kind of cool. And then you can just kind of fold this down. Then for each of the legs, you want to take their own respective tread sections, untab them, rotate this section forward, take this little back panel, and just fold that down, which gives you the clearance to take the rest of this panel, fold it up, flip out the feet like this. And they like the heel pieces have a tendency to like brush past this in a way that doesn't feel like amazing, but it's fine. And then you just kind of rotate this back onto the back of his leg here, just like that, and do that same thing on both sides here. And there we have his legs all done. Then for the arms here, you just take these sections, split them, bring them down to the side like this, and rotate them forward like this, and then take the actual forearm bits, which are these, and they'll kind of rotate down on these joints here, and then you can flip out the hand, and then take this shoulder pad piece and just fold it down just like that. And there we have Bludgeon in his base robot mode. And yeah, he's pretty cool looking. Now, obviously, there's a few options for the backpack here, so you can have it looking a little bit cooler and a little bit less like Guzzle from G1. Obviously, you can take the main turret section out here to have it be the sword, and then you can also, I like to just kind of open the section up just so this bit kind of pokes out, and then like rotate this a couple degrees so it sits on his back like that, and he's got this sword kind of poking up over the top here. I think that's a pretty cool look. But there's a few options for storage for the sword too, like kind of automatically this little bit kind of pops out here, so you can take this section and just kind of feed it through here to give him storage for the blade there. And then you could just kind of leave this one up like here, but it also does have a separate little slot here that you can use to store that as well. Can they go the other way? I'm not actually sure. Yeah, you could do it the other way if you want to. They kind of both fit in there. It's just a little bit more tight and clean the other way, but you know, it works for storage. Generally, I like to store the sword there, but then just leave this kind of back up here poking out of his backpack, just because I feel like that's a little bit cooler looking. But you know, to each their own. And yeah, this guy is obviously much more based on like the G1 Pretender Shell Bludgeon than like that, you know, Wreckage repaint figure was. And he's a bit cluttered with all of his kibble and stuff like that, but overall I think that he looks super cool. I do like the head sculpt. It does look a little bit like buggy compared to like, you know, a more like skeleton head sculpt, and there was like a very popular sort of third-party head going around at the time that replaced him with a slightly more G1 looking head. But you know, honestly, I don't really mind the way this one looks. But yeah, in terms of articulation, his head is just on a swivel here, so it can rotate around like that. The shoulders here are on swivels at this joint, and then for going out to the side, you can use this transformation joint. It just kind of disconnects it from the body, but you also have this joint up here, so you can move just the arm without moving the shoulder, but it does kind of bump into this like rubber piece, which again is not like as pliable as, you know, honestly, if it's going to be rubber, you'd probably want it to be a bit more pliable than these are, but whatever. And then in terms of his elbow, he's got a joint right here and a joint right here, so he does technically have a double jointed elbow. And what's really cool too is I like how the wheels of the tank like, you know, inside bits of the treads actually do like fold up to be on the elbow. Like that's not a cheated piece, that actually does end up there, which I think is really cool. Just gonna take the sword off for now. And then yeah, he's also got a thigh swivel, and then the hands can kind of just fold in like that. Nothing at the waist, just because of how all that flips around. His hips are on ratchets, so they are a little bit wiggly, but they can go forward and back only about that far before it starts bumping into stuff. And then out to the side, these can fold out to the side. This bit's a little bit more limited just because of the whole like hilt thing, but you know, it can still go out a bit. He's got a sort of neat Mech Alive thigh swivel here, where you've got like these internal bits that also rotate, which is kind of cool. He's got a ratcheted knee joint that goes over 90, which is pretty cool there. And then the feet can kind of tilt forward and back, but they're just kind of sculpted in that slight A stance there, so they don't have any proper like ankle tilt side to side. But yeah, obviously we can give him his weapons here. You kind of have to like force them into his hands just a little bit because the clearance isn't quite there, but it, you know, it works fairly well. It doesn't feel too dangerous or anything. Yeah, no, I think he looks cool holding them. Obviously, with that upgrade kit that came with the head, there was also like a better sort of like hard plastic sword, so that, you know, because like this is kind of like the main sticking point of of how this figure is aged poorly, is the way that the sword works, and it wasn't even great at the time. But yeah, you know, I still think he looks cool holding his weapons there, even if the sword is a little bit warped. He does sort of have a hard time standing up. He's got very little heel support, and for some reason, like I feel like there's like some slight misalignment in the way that the feet are ratcheted, because they never feel like they're sitting like totally symmetrically with each other. But I don't know, maybe that's just my imagination. But yeah, because he's got such little heels and like a big, you know, backpack with the mechanism in it, it's not like super hard to knock him over. And then it also doesn't help that, like, though the ratchets still work, there's just like too much give between like the forward and back ratchet on his hips, so he does feel floppy, even if he's not like, you know, he's like floppy, but he's not like the joints are just like flying all over the place. It's a little weird, but yeah. Either way, you know, he's kind of annoying to pose just because of all the kibbliness and you know, the toppling over and stuff like that. But he's got a decent amount of articulation considering all the junk that he has kind of floating around him. Like, you can actually kind of get him into a pose where he's like actually like sitting down with his legs crossed, which I always thought was a kind of a neat thing. I don't think it was like specifically designed for this, and you do have to like force some of the joints in places a little bit, but still, it's just like, yeah, that's kind of a, you know, I've done it better than that, but that's a kind of a cool look there. You can have him like sitting with his sword on his lap or something like that. I feel like that's pretty neat that he can achieve that, even though he's got like all of these messed up joints and all the like panels flying off over the place and all the things like that. So, you know, he's decent in terms of articulation, but definitely not up to sort of like modern standards, I would say. He's definitely a little bit cumbersome, but you know, sort of less so than you'd expect him to be, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. What's going on with the feet here? Doesn't help that they have like these have two sort of hinges here, and this one is ratcheted, so it can be a little bit annoying to get those aligned. But either way, in terms of comparisons in this mode, here he is again with Kingdom Sideswipe, so you can see what he looks like with an average size deluxe there. And then here he is again with Legacy Evolution Bludgeon, just so you can see the two versions there. And yeah, in terms of robot mode, I definitely like the Legacy Evolution version better. He's just a little bit cleaner. Like, you know, he's got a little bit less of the like samurai thing going on, unfortunately, but I don't know, it just works a little bit better, even though he's a Tarn repaint. Like, it still works, and his head sculpt is a lot better in my opinion. But yeah, no, both are cool figures. Honestly, I had this guy as my like canon bludgeon on my shelf for a long time until this one came out, but they're both fun figures to mess around with. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to him. He's definitely a neat figure. I think he works a lot better as like a bludgeon update, and he was one of those ones that like in the Revenge of the Fallen toy line that like it strives enough away from the movie aesthetic that he kind of fits in with like some Generations things, honestly, like even though the head sculpt is pretty movie-ified. But yeah, you know, he still kind of fits in with other figures. He's just got like a little bit more sort of like sculpted detail on him than you'd expect from a typical Generations figure. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to him. If you enjoy my videos, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. I do reviews every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And without further ado, here we have Transformers Revenge of the Fallen Voyager class Bludgeon.